As we begin today's conversation about our Jewish cowardice and hypocrisy, let me tell you about the event that just took place and triggered my desire to talk about it. In the weeks leading up to New York City's mayoral election, Rabbi Elliot Cosgrove of conservative Park Avenue Synagogue stood up, gave sermon that breathed fire, real fire. I liked it a lot. He warned the Jewish community about Zohran Mamdani, the anti-Zionist Shia Muslim socialist whose politics rest on delegitimization of Israel and laundering the rhetoric of those who seek its destruction. Cosgrove's warnings were sharp, urgent, serious. And then election day came. Mamdani won. And the world suddenly changed. No, Mamdani did not change at all. But our rabbi, his voice, his attitude did change. Speaking yesterday at the convention of the American Zionist Movement, Cosgrove continued with his peacemaking position and told a room full of Zionists that they, quote, should not be surprised that roughly a third of Jews voted for Mamdani. He blamed Israel for that. He explained that for liberal Zionists disillusioned by the Israeli government, Mamdani's anti-Zionism is merely a difference of degree, not of kind. He spoke of community fissures, of a new chapter of American Zionism, of avoiding destructive labels for those who oppose Jewish sovereignty. In other words, Mamdani remained the same, but the Jewish courage of this rabbi collapsed. What makes this transformation especially astonishing and frankly sickening is that this rabbi said it in full knowledge of what just happened in New York. While Rabbi Cosgrove was polishing his theology of accommodation, Mamdani was busy appointing the people who will shape New York's future. On November 26, Mamdani's first major pick for criminal justice policy was announced. It was Maison the General Linen, an independent hip-hop artist, a man convicted in 1990s of 2 violent armed robberies, one of them for beating a cab driver with a beer bottle, the other holding a driver at gunpoint. A man who has stood proudly with Louis Farrakhan, a man who worked with Farrakhan on the Million Men March, a man who posts that Jews, quote, uphold white supremacy, unquote, a man whose closest political partners are Linda Sarsour, Tamika Mallory, and Angela Pinto, named synonymous with anti-Israel agitation and open anti-Semitic flirtation. Maison Linen is a reflection of the worldview of Mamdani's political universe. And yet, this is the moment Rabbi Cosgrove chose to soften up. This is the moment he chose to preach nuance. This is the moment he looked at a mayor-elect who embraces anti-police radicals, Farrakhan associates, and men who accuse Jews of white supremacy and said, Let us broaden the tent. A tent that now apparently includes those who would beat innocent people with beer bottles and call Jews parasites and white supremacists. If Rabbi Cosgrove did not know these facts, he should have. If he knew them and still delivered this sermon, then his wishy-washiness is not merely a personality trait. It is failure of moral leadership. And that, my friends, is where my monologue begins today and continues. Not about Israel, not about Hamas, not about the people who want to murder us. No. Today I want to talk about us, about what happens to Jews when the pressure rises and suddenly the ground under our feet is no longer safe. About the psychological reflex that has destroyed Jewish communities for centuries and begins destroying American Jewry today. I'm talking about appeasement, about fear disguised as morality, about rabbis who thunder on Shabbat and beg for reconciliation on Sunday, about leaders who take their internal compass not from Torah, not from the Jewish history. Their compass is opinion of people they need, who surround them, or the latest election results. So, in October, Rabbi Elliot Cosgrove stood tall. He condemned the fact that nearly a third of Jews in his community, that is in New York, voted for Zohran Mamdani, a man whose entire political identity is built on demonizing Israel, demonizing Zionism, and whitewashing the ideology of people who beheaded Jewish children on October 7. In October, Rabbi Cosgrove spoke clearly. He said, "This is dangerous. This is insane. This is not who we are." But now, a little bit later, given that Mamdani won, suddenly our bold rabbi discovers the beauty of compromise. Suddenly, he urges us to broaden the tent, to respect dissenting voices, to accept the political reality, to listen to the pain of anti-Zionist Jews. The only thing that changed between October and December was who won. This is the eternal disease of the diaspora Jew. We become brave only when bravery costs nothing. And when courage becomes expensive, suddenly we rediscover universalism, nuance, self-criticism, and all other euphemisms for fear. Let me put it bluntly. A community that condemns a threat before the election and rationalizes it after the election is not guided by morality. It is guided by social anxiety. Nothing in Mamdani's ideology softened after he won. Nothing in his record changed. The only thing that changed is the power dynamic. And suddenly a Jewish leader feels pressure to adjust his tone. This is not bridge building. This is not pluralism. This is the instinct of a minority that desperately wants to avoid conflict with majority around it. Cosgrove's message to his community is essentially this: if we stand up for ourselves and lose, we must apologize for having stood up. This is how Jews disappear. Not with pogroms, not with expulsions, but with self-erasure, dressed as dialogue and peacemaking. Disappear as a result of fear to be set apart, to be part of a holy nation, afraid to be Jews. But let's go a bit deeper. For 4,000 years, from the time of Esav, a twin brother of Jacob, the Jew lived with one great psychological need: the need to be accepted by non-Jews, not just tolerated, accepted. This is older than Zionism, older than emancipation, older than Spinoza, and even older than Moses. It is rooted in a simple terror. If others hate me, I can't live. If many others hate me, I might die. So we develop survival strategies. We apologize even when we are right. We compromise even when we hold truth. We condemn ourselves before others condemn us. We try to preempt hatred with demonstrable humility. Sometimes this instinct is rational. In Galut, in exile, or as where we live today in diaspora, a world where we depend on the mood of kings, presidents, and mobs, appeasement can sometimes save lives. But inability to physically defend ourselves, inability to stand together and fight, is a result of this situation and produces a spiritual deformity. That's the difference between a Jew in Galut and a Jew in a state of Israel, in a Jewish state. Being in Galut, the spiritual deformity paralyzes us. It makes us obedient to evildoers, to those who despise our very existence. In such situation, we love to call our fear ethics. We love to call our anxiety moral refinement. Rabbi Cosgrove's shift is not a new theology. It is an old reflex. We must learn to live with our enemies, because otherwise they will not love us. This is the opposite of Judaism. It is opposite of God's commandment to be a holy nation, a people set apart from everybody else. Cosgrove's Judaism is a diaspora neurosis masquerading as prophetic wisdom. Let us recall where such appeasement leads. History is a cruel teacher, but it is a clear one for those who are not afraid to learn from it. Let's take a look at Vienna. At the turn of 20th century, when that city was full of brilliant, assimilated, politically active Jews, like in today's New York or America. They were doctors, journalists, bankers, artists. They believed that if they were polite enough, enlightened enough, patriotic enough, anti-Semitism, which was born 20 years earlier, would be only a passing phenomenon. Then, in the year of 1900, Vienna elected Karl Lueger, the openly anti-Semitic mayor. Every Jew with a brain understood the danger. They opposed him. They wrote editorials. They campaigned. But when he won, suddenly the tone changed. Oh, he is not so bad. We can work with him. He does not mean us. He means those other Jews. Let's give him a chance. It was wishy-washiness elevated to a civic virtue. 20 years later, you know what happened. Vienna became the ideological womb of Nazism. Appeasement brought temporary comfort and permanent disaster. "20 years later was also Weimar Germany, with Jewish intellectuals explaining away the danger. During Weimar Republic, Jewish thinkers insisted that extremist movements could be tamed by dialogue. They mocked Jews like me, who they called the alarmists. They said anti-Semitism was a fringe phenomenon. They said we must respect multiple perspectives. Well, in 1933, one such perspective marched in brown shorts. The Jews had been polite. The Jews had been inclusive. The Jews had been nuanced. The Nazis were simple. They wanted power, and they took it. In the Soviet Union after the Holocaust and before it collapsed, Jews also tried to desperately fit in. I remember it very well. When growing up, I heard my parents speak Yiddish. I was embarrassed by their backwardness. They don't speak like normal people, I thought. Despite Soviet destruction of all Jewish schools and synagogues, despite making Hebrew an illegal language, despite constant propaganda against Israel, most Soviet Jews believed, at least wanted to believe, that if we are good citizens, if we don't stand out as Jews, if we don't respond to those who publicly call us kikes, if we change our names, the system will leave us alone. And then came the anti-Semitic campaigns, hiding their real nature, using Zionism as their target, using Israel as their target, the quota system for university students and jobs, the daily discrimination, and mock trials for some kind of economic crimes. Your name alone was enough to destroy your life. Yes, appeasement may have protected us. Silence did protect us. Playing alone did protect us. But the price for all of these things was daily humiliation, disrespect, and the development of identity that had nothing to do with reality. Only those who had the courage to speak, who refused to bend, survived as human beings worthy of respect. Some of us went through shock treatments in psychiatric hospitals. Some of us lost careers, families, passports. Some were exiled. But most of us eventually were able to leave and took advantage of that opportunity. That is why I cannot tolerate wishy-washiness today. I have seen where it leads. But now we're talking about not Soviet Union. We're talking about America, the Golden Medina, where we can speak openly and hear each other. In America today, we don't fear so much physical violence In many situations, we have purchased handguns to defend ourselves, as we fear more than anything social expulsion. That is, being unfriended, uninvited, unfashionable, unaligned with campus or progressive culture. This is why a rabbi pivots when Mamdani wins. Not because he discovered new philosophical insights, but because he fears his own community becoming a minority within the broader liberal universe of New York. He complains that his type of Judaism is not recognized in Israel, and I fully agree with him regarding this complaint. But this is not the only problem with his Judaism. His Judaism, like the Judaism of ultra-Orthodox Satmar sect, is also Judaism of dependency and insecurity, a wishy-washy Judaism that makes me vomit. A real Jewish leader would not have said what this rabbi said. A real Jewish leader would have stood up after Mamdani's victory and said, Mamdani won. We must respect the democratic process, but we must oppose his ideology tomorrow as clearly as we opposed it yesterday. Anti-Zionism is the ultimate form of anti-Semitism. It is hatred of Jews who refuse to be cowed, who refuse to be demis. Just because you have a power, it does not make anti-Semitism respectable. Election results do not convert hatred into diversity. We're not going to bow. That would be a show of leadership. What we got instead was the soft wine of surrender. My friends, when a rabbi changes his theology because a politician wins an election, it's not religion. It's not Judaism. It is a fear of being a Jew. And as our history teaches, it is this fear of being a Jew why 80% of Jews stopped being Jews after the destruction of the Second Temple 2,000 years ago.